Guys, it's finally here, the 2023 X13, the device I've been waiting for since CES in January. Except it's not actually here. In the USA, we still do not have access to this. The listing finally went live on Best Buy for this model, but then a few days later, it got delisted and said that it was out of stock, and it was pulled off their site for some reason. Anyways, for some reason in the USA, we cannot get this device. Everyone else has it. We'll get it at some point, I'm assuming, but I finally took the nuclear option and got this Great Britain imported X13. It's the 4060 version, but I finally have it in hand to play around with it and tell you guys what I think about it. And that's coming up after this message from our sponsor. Softwarekeep. As tech enthusiasts, we're always needing licenses to power the software on our computers, but that doesn't mean we have to pay full price. Whether it's Windows 10, 11, Office, or antivirus, Softwarekeep has you covered with software keys to keep you in the game and for way less money. In fact, you can expect to save 25% or more over Microsoft retail pricing. I use Softwarekeep to get up and running on the latest version of Office Standalone, and the experience, price, and 24/7 customer service and the lifetime guarantee can make you feel good about your purchase. Don't waste money paying full price or paying for illegitimate keys. They aren't going to last. Softwarekeep is the best and most affordable way to get legitimate licenses for the software products you need the most. And the deal just gets sweeter. Use my exclusive discount code to get an extra 20% off your next product key. See the link in the description below and rest easy knowing that you're getting legitimate products at the best possible price. And with that, thanks to Softwarekeep for sponsoring this video, and on to the content. Okay, so the ROG FLOW X13 for 2023 was announced all the way back at CES, even just a few days before then. So like, it's been all year that I've been waiting for this device to come out. And the cool thing about it is you move from a 40-watt GPU, a 3050 Ti, moves up to maximum 4070, and you move from 40 to 45 watts to 65 watts, which meant this was a doubling of performance, as we saw with the Z13. And the X13 as well should see roughly, almost a doubling in graphical performance, which is amazing for this form factor. So at this point, the X13 has been launched almost everywhere else in the world except the USA. I don't know why. And at this point, I was like, I'm not going to wait anymore. So this is the nuclear option. This is the X13 that is sourced from the UK. And unfortunately, they don't carry the 4070 version of it in the UK, but at least I have one that we can take a look at finally. This is a second-hand device. It has been opened before I got my grubby mitts on it, but it is like new condition, and it looks like they packed it up pretty well. So let's take a look in the box. Of course, we've got our 130 watt AC adapter to USB-C, new for this year. Similar looking, but 130 watts instead of 100. Let's get into the box. Now, one thing you'll note is they have upgraded the packaging on this. Look at this guy. That is very cool looking. One thing Asus is pretty good at is presentation and packaging. That's definitely something they are good at. We saw that with the Z13. The Z13 looked really nice. Well, all the years the Z13's been out, it has looked really nice. But let's go ahead and take a look and get initial reactions on this. Okay, and I do have the 2022 version of this to compare. The first thing I'm noticing is this is now, it feels more soft touch than the previous one. So that's kind of interesting. You can kind of feel the wave on there. It is nice. And it has a little indentation there so you can get your finger up underneath it. Let's look at all the sides. Very similar to well, in fact, let's pull out. Okay, in my hand is the 2023, and this one here on top is the 2022 version. And the first thing you'll notice is, of course, the 2022 has more depth to it. So this is a smaller device from front to back. Port layout unchanged, other than this button is smaller on this side. The back is, you can tell from the back that the new model is just slightly thicker. And on the other side, you can see that we have the larger ROG flap on the 2023 edition. And it also pivots. Don't want to break it. It pivots so you don't lose this thing. I haven't lost my 2022. I have it somewhere. But it makes it a lot easier to use that and not get it lost. You also get a micro SD slot on this side, which we didn't get in the 2022. So that's an upgrade right there, the micro SD slot. And let's go back to just the 2023. Of course, we have our stylish Republic of Gamers little bit there. It feels, does it feel the same? 2022, 2023. This feels more compact, which makes it feel slightly more dense, but it feels like the same weight. So that's definitely something. Of course, we'll be taking a look on the inside. Again, this is the 4060 edition of this. But so far, I am impressed. This is exactly what I thought, and it feels really nice. This soft touch is good. Let's look at the bottom on the 2022 just for a second. Because one thing I noticed is you have this lift, this lifted lip, which the old one had these feet, but not a lip. So that's interesting. But, I mean, when you open this and flip it around, sorry, wrong side. When you open this, ooh, okay, and flip it around, it should rest against that lip along the back and on the feet in the front. And that feels actually really nice. The keys disable on the back, just for those of you uninitiated to the X13. But this feels solid. Like this closed against that, and it doesn't feel like look, it's not unsticking. As a contrast, if you look at the 2022 and we open it up and you flip it around into tablet mode, you get a lot more play. You can see this kind of flips quite a bit, and it's quite open throughout the ridge here. But if you look at this one, these are more rounded. I don't know if that's more rounded, but they're it's more square. Like, it feels more like a solid brick. It feels like almost more like a tablet, where this definitely feels like a clamshell that's been opened up and flipped around. It feels more like that. Also, and this is probably going to look more drastic when the screens are on, but you can see that the 2022 is much wider because they shaved a good portion of the depth of this device without shrinking the screen. You can see there's a huge buffer here, like almost a 1-inch buffer of black space on the 2022, and the 2023 it's maybe half an inch there. Is the keyboard and trackpad, because they are drastically different. So the 2022, you can see this is a very small, well, it's not very small, but it was barely adequate trackpad that we're dealing with here. But look at this one. This is huge. It's much bigger than the previous one. In person, it's much more drastic than I would have expected to begin with. Also, look at the backlighting on these keys.
Set up your device using a screen reader,
oh wow, we got Great Britain voice on that. The light bleed, all the light almost comes from underneath the keys on the 2022. If you look at it, see how it's like underneath the keys? This one is shining through the lettering, which looks way better. So definitely some huge upgrades to the keyboard and to the trackpad. So very cool there to see. Now that I can kind of verify that everything's working, I'm going to be upgrading it to a 2 terabyte SSD. It's a 2230. That's a Micron. So I'm going to just go ahead and show you what it looks like to take this apart. Alright, so on these Asus devices, I find it's easiest to kind of work your way from these corners. Okay, yeah, so just if you get one of these corners, you can kind of just release it around all edges. Second you get one or two of them, it becomes fairly easy. Just take your time. Usually there's not wires on these. Sometimes there are, so just, and I mean in general on laptops. So here we go. Here is our SSD on this side and our MediaTek Wi-Fi adapter on the other side. Now I do have an Intel Wi-Fi card, and I'm debating that whether I should just put that in right now. I guess I should. Well, before I take this SSD completely out, you want to turn off the battery. So these little clips, and let me zoom in so you can see that maybe a little bit better. So you want to be just so gentle with this, but there is a little clip. You want to push it up, and that's all it takes. And then you want to be very careful with this as well. And it's good to have a piece of plastic to put underneath it. So I'm going to lift this battery up on both sides. You don't want to cross the wires, but we're going to lift that up just like that. I'm going to put the plastic underneath it so it doesn't fall down on it. And there we go. Let's start with the SSD. So just lift it up a little bit and slide it out. Of note is it does have thermal compound underneath it, which is interesting. Now these are not bad SSDs, I just want more space. So for example, this is a 2400 micron, which is, I mean, for that size, for a 1 terabyte, if you wanted a 1 terabyte, that's what I'd recommend. So that's kind of the best drive there is for that size. In fact, this that I'm replacing with the 2 terabyte version is literally the same device. It just doesn't have the sticker label on it. So we'll put the pad back down on it and put this 2 terabyte version in place. Now what I've found most recently with, you may wonder, well, how do I get my operating system back on there? Well, I have found that ASUS basically does everything through the Windows Store really does a good job of providing the drivers for anything you might need. And some people, I mean, all my Dolby usually works. There might be some Dolby Digital components you have to back up, But on all the most recent ones I've done that on, my Dolby Digital comes right back, no issues. So the other huge thing about this 2023 version is that the ghosting issue that we've seen on all the past X13s, which has been frankly not great, it's amazingly better on the new version. And if this doesn't pick up, I'll take a picture with a camera and you can see the difference. But this has almost no blur on that 165 frames per second, where this one, the panel refresh rate is just not good on previous versions. On the 2023, it looks really, really decent. Okay, so I've got both these devices here, and this is the 22, this is the 2023. In this test, this is not necessarily a benchmark run. For the first thing, these machines are sitting flat on the table, which really impedes airflow. If you switch these devices into this mode, like this, they actually get much better air to the fans, and you can see like a 10-degree temperature drop when you do that. So just keep that in mind, that this is not like a benchmark run. You can get better performance using it in different modes. But I do want to show the comparison between the 3050 and this is the 4060 version of this device, and you can see how good the performance really is, and the wattage. We're going to take a look at that all now by running a benchmark with some statistics on the screen. So let's go ahead and do that now. Oh, to get started though, we are going to be putting these in the same mode. So let's go over modes for a second. On the 2022, the performance mode was, you got the maximum GPU boost because it limited the CPU, which meant that it would boost to the GPU more. So performance was actually the best option on the 2022. On the 2023, you actually don't get the highest boost on your GPU unless you're in turbo mode, which is good and bad. It's good because you have, it's 130 watt versus 100 watts, so you get an extra 30 watts to work with. But it seems to err on the side of providing more power to the CPU rather than the GPU in this particular 2023 version. So we're going to test these in turbo mode, just so they're in the same mode that you guys can see, and the graphics are capable of boosting on both of these. They are also both in ultimate mode, which means the mux switch is active. And this one does have Advanced Optimus, which you can leave it in standard mode and then switch it in driver to the GPU, which is just as performant. But I put them in ultimate just to keep things kind of fair between them, and we can look and see how they behave. So let's go ahead and get started with that benchmark test. And there's a few things on the screen to take note of. The first thing is the GPU temperature. You can see that right now the 3050 is actually hotter than the 4060, but I imagine that will change here pretty quick. The frame rate also is here. Obviously the test is not started, but now that it is, 2023 definitely loading up quicker. And now that the game is actually running, you're seeing 60 frames a second on the 2022, and you're seeing almost double the frame rate. We're at 124 right now. So it just depends what section of the benchmark it's in. They're a little bit off, but you can see there's drastic performance increase here. You can also see the GPU temperature is much hotter on the 2023. Now that has to do with a couple things, mainly this can boost to 60 watts. But if you look over here, there's something interesting. It's not nearly as hot, but they're both at 40 watts. But look at the CPU. The CPU is only at 14 watts on the 2022, where the 2023 is letting the CPU boost up to, 40 watts, which is good if your game requires CPU, but in this game particularly, it does way better when you give more power to the GPU. So it's not balancing super well. This can go up to 60 watts, but it's not doing it because the CPU is so high. And I will show you how to alleviate that here in a minute. But still, it's using more wattage, and the 4060, the 4000 series is so efficient that even at the exact same wattage between 3050 and 4060, you're just getting a much better frame rate, much better experience, not to mention the display on the 2023 has very little ghosting, which it's pretty obvious in person. This looks like a glass, like you could reach through, and this looks a little muddy, especially when it's panning and things. You get ghosting and blur as it moves around. But pretty interesting. We can see that this is getting awfully hot at 86 degrees Celsius on the GPU, even though it's not even boosting up into 60 watts here. So that is a concern, definitely. This one is hot as well. It's 80 degrees, but it's not going to get much hotter. It's giving all the watts it can. This could be giving more watts if it weren't temperature limited. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm actually going to flip them around so they have airflow, and we'll see what happens. So we'll start with the 2023. I'm going to flip it like this, and I'm going to do the same thing on the 2022. And you can see our temperature went down from the 86 level. And when you do this, you get a little bit of air coming through the front. It kind of blows you, keeps you warm. It's not necessarily what you want, but it's fine. So I don't know if that's necessarily, I mean, it's definitely helping, and where it's helping, as you can see, it's boosting more. It's staying closer to, that we're up at 46 even, where before it was kind of trapped at 40. This is letting it boost just a little bit higher than it would. Although this is a little bit disappointing. They advertise this as a 60 watt device. It can get 60 watts, and I'll show you that in a minute. But it doesn't tend to want to go there very often. It much prefers to hang out around 45. It does not boost very often at all. But you can see at this point in the benchmark, performance drastically better on the 2023. So I think we've kind of proved that point. So that's the amazing thing, really. Like, even though this is, maybe pinging into 50 watts sometimes, even if both these machines are at 40 watts, you're getting almost double the performance on the 4000 series GPUs. They're just really good. So let me show you how to get 60 actual watts on this thing. So I'm going to put the 2023 away because, I guess at this point I could let the scores come up just for fun. So just setting a turbo, no effort, no tweaks, no little things, which I'll show you how to do in a bit. You're getting 10128 on the 2023, 6424 on the 2022. So lots more performance, and for the 4070 version of this, add about 10 to 15% on top of that. Okay, so you say to yourself, this thing's supposed to give me 60 watts on the GPU. What's going on here? That's what I said to myself. So what's going on? Well, basically, it never reaches that unless the CPU is using so little wattage yeah. But let's let it hit that. Here's how I'm gonna do it. And you don't have to do this. Like, performance is just fine without doing this. But if you really wanted to see the GPU boosting to 60 watts to prove that it can do it, if you come into the x86 tuning utility, this is a free application. Shout out to James CJ for making this. Here's what I like to use to get full performance. The Ryzen chips are so efficient at low wattages, it's incredible. So just for fun, I'm gonna come in here and we're gonna limit the wattage. So how the NVIDIA boost works is you don't actually see those higher frame rates unless your CPU is using less than a certain amount of watts. So anyways, I'm going to limit the CPU to 15 watts. That's what I did here. I'm going to start the adapted mode. Again, there's other ways to do this, but I'm just going to show you what that's going to do to our performance. So you can see now the CPU is not going to use more than 15 watts. Kind of like the 2022 does. It tends to not use more than 15 watts during this benchmark. And look, we saw a peak at 57 on the GPU. 60. There you go. You saw 60 watts on on the GPU. So it is very fickle in getting at 60 watts. However, you know, being able to get 60 watts on this is nice. I'll say that. And here's the thing. I think they made the right choice in saying this boost to 60 watts. You know, the Z13 boosted to 65 watts, and it did it pretty well. And it did it fairly often. And this we can see it's really kind of hanging out around 55. It gets to 60, but I mean, it's just getting hot. It tries to keep the temperatures down. And if I give it some more airflow by lifting this up a little bit, lift this off the ground, we might see it boost a little higher. But it's almost more like a 55 boost. It's not great, guys. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because 4000 series is so efficient even at 50 and 55 watts that you're still getting a huge performance uplift over the 3050 Ti. So it is what it is, but kind of an interesting thing. Okay, one thing that gets requested a lot in my videos that I never really cover very often is battery life. And it's because it's so subjective. It just depends what you're doing. I'm going to show you a couple things that you can calculate how long your battery life is going to last based on any number of different things. Because the point is, you have a battery in these things. This has a 75 watt hour battery. So if you look at how many watts it's using while you're doing whatever you're doing, you can calculate the battery life. So right now I'm in the worst case scenario. I have this thing in turbo mode. I also have the NVIDIA GPU active as the NVIDIA GPU only in Advanced Optimus. And you can see right here, I've got a power meter on the device, and it is literally using anywhere from 25 to 30 watts on what it's using. So let's take an average and say that it's on average 30 watts. So here's what we're going to do. You have a 75 watt hour battery. Divide that by 30 watts. You're only going to get 2.5 hours. Now, hold off. That is not the battery life on this machine. I'm just showing you an example in the worst case scenario for using this machine. So if you put this in gaming mode, you're running on the NVIDIA GPU, this is using a lot of power. And so this is why some people like get a notebook and they're like, "Oh, the battery life sucks. It's so bad." Blah blah blah. Okay, well, watch my power meter, okay? We're going to walk this down. You're done gaming. So let's first things first, let's turn off that NVIDIA GPU. We're going to drop it into Optimus mode. And the reason we're going to drop it into Optimus mode first is because that is going to disable it, but it's also going to allow us to turn it completely off in Armory Crate. So we're now on Optimus. It's not going to affect our battery life a ton. We can see it really didn't do too much. We're still sitting between 25 and 30 watts. So let's do the next obvious thing, and let's drop this thing into silent mode. Okay, we've gone into silent mode. The fans are ramping down, but you can see it's still using a fair amount of power. So what's going on here? Well, we still have the NVIDIA GPU active, but we're now at about 25 watts on average, let's say. So take your 75 watt hour battery, divide it by 25, you'd get 3 hours with it sitting here like this. So what else do we need to do? Well, I've got bright lights on this. The display's using a lot. Let's turn down the brightness to medium. Okay, so that should help a little bit too. But you can see it's still quite high, the battery usage that it's using here. So let's switch into eco mode. Let's turn off that very intensive 4060 GPU. And you can see that it doesn't like that. And of course it does it while I'm filming, but let me show you what that means. Basically, you need to go click this button and go into your ROG FLOW X13. There's some active programs using that GPU. And most likely, if we click into GPU power savings, yeah, it's just Windows being dumb. We're gonna click stop all, and then we're gonna switch into eco mode. You can do that here as well. Let's see if it took. Hopefully it does. Okay, we're now in eco mode. You can see the 4060 disappeared. And now, there we go. We saw 15 watts operating there for a minute. So now we're using, look, we're only using 8, 9, 10 watts. Okay, well, what's our battery life going to be now? Well, if it's averaging, let's say 10 watts, take your 75 watt hour battery and divide that by 10 watts. You're going to get 7.5 hours of battery life. But let me show you another trick that is quite interesting, and that is power plans. Now, what's very interesting about this is Armory Crate, for example, if we put this in performance mode, it always puts it into high performance power plan. And this is very stupid. This is the dumbest thing. So you put it in high performance power plan, and you're still just idling, and your watts are still like really high. So look, we're like 16, 17. Put it in balanced. Okay, wow, we just dropped to 11 to 13 from 16 and 17. And here's the thing. The high performance stops cores from like shutting down or parking or whatever. And so it never lets them park, even though you're not doing much. So I would always come in and set yourself to balanced, even if you're gaming, put it into balanced. So anyways, that's kind of what's going on here is you can get battery life like very low on this thing, especially in balanced. So we're in balanced mode. We're literally still in performance where we're not in low power. And look, 7 watts. 7 freaking watts. Why can't they tune this themselves? I have to put it into balanced, and it's literally in performance. It's literally in performance mode. Because if you put it in power saving mode, it's going to put it in power saving mode, which may help with some background processes. But look, power saver mode, 14 watts. That's stupid. move it to balanced, and now we're back down to 7. So 7 watts, what is that going to get us? Take your 75 watt hour battery, divide it by 7 watts. That's 11 hours of battery life. And it's even at 6 sometimes. And my brightness is still up. Let me turn the brightness down. Brightness down. Six watts. And that's the thing. Every watt counts at the very end. Is the difference between 15 hours and 11 hours is a difference of a few watts, a few tweaks. You see it hit 5 there? Watch this. Say we took our 75 watt hour battery, divide it by 6 watts. That's 12.5 hours. Okay, and if we can, we can limit the CPU further, and I won't keep talking about this, but say we get it down to 5, divide the 75 by 5, suddenly you're getting 15 hours. So, yeah, I guess the point here is it helps to have a watt meter. Balanced mode is your friend, and I don't know why they don't tune this, because balanced mode is going to get you 10 hours when you're browsing. It's going to get you, 8 to 10 hours. But put it in, power saver mode. Let's go to 12 watts instead of I don't know who tunes these things, but it's really dumb, because balanced mode is where you want to be for efficiency. I don't know why no one can figure this out at Asus or anywhere else, but yeah, Ryzen chips do well with balanced mode because they can turn themselves off at will. And it's so fast turning on and off, it doesn't make a difference in performance that I've seen, and this really saves you battery life. So for those of you who always ask me for battery life figures, this is kind of where you're at. If you're gaming, when we're gaming, let me show you this too. Say you're gaming full speed and it's using literally 110 watts. So take your 75 watt hour battery, divide it by 110 watts. You're only getting 0.68 of an hour. So that's minutes. That's like 40 minutes, roughly. So your battery life is anywhere from 40 minutes to 15 hours, depending on what you want to be doing on your device. But just idling around, you should expect, between 8 to 12 hours, I would say, on this. I am able to get this watt level way lower than I am on the Z13. And that's the other thing, is these AMD chips can be so efficient. In fact, let's open up this utility again. I'm still talking. This is going to be such a long video. But let's go back to the adaptive just for fun, and let's like make this thing like have no power. like let's just give it. Okay, 8 is the lowest. Okay, there we go. 8 watts. And brightness down. Balanced mode. Maybe it's not going to do anything. Okay, 6. 6.3. So yeah, this thing's pretty efficient in general. If you play with it, you can't just turn on the GPU and sit in turbo mode and expect to get great battery life. It's just not going to happen. And okay, so I've said my piece on this. I'm going to move on. But hopefully I made my point. All right, so that's kind of my overview and look at the 2023 X13. What do I think? Is this going to be my device that I use? Well, I already used the 2023 X13 and really love it. And I think that continues on into this year. I was tempted by both Z13 acronym, which was very cool, and the Zenbook Pro 14 OLED, and I'm going to kind of talk about some distinctions between these. The new revised change that they did this year, making it slightly thinner, is definitely welcome. That makes the tablet mode that much better. Slimmer bezels, easy to use, lightweight as always. However, even with this form factor change and the fact that it's a tiny bit thicker, the weight stayed exactly the same. I believe the new one was 1360 grams and the old one was 1361. So it actually got just the tiniest bit lighter. I like the soft touch material. Compared to the Z13, I really do like that you can use this as a traditional laptop. It's super easy to pull out and use, and you don't have to, have keyboards and kickstands to rip off and play around with. That's fine for some people and in some use cases, but I really think that in terms of form factor, the X13 is a better form factor than the Z13, as much as I love the Z13. Talking about the ZenBook Pro 14 OLED versus this machine, because I really like the ZenBook Pro 14 OLED. I had to ship it back because it had some dead pixels on it, which either they appeared or I didn't notice them at the very beginning because there were red dots on the display on several pixels. So I had to send it back. But now having this in hand, yes, it doesn't have as good a performance. That ZenBook Pro 14 OLED is so performant, it's ridiculous. However, this is more performant at lower wattages. The AMD CPU is very efficient, and it can be tuned down to have very good battery life. Like I said, you saw me, I could get it to roughly, 12 to 13, potentially 15 hours. I couldn't even get close to that on the ZenBook Pro, but that's not even a major concern for me. But what is the ZenBook Pro 14 OLED doesn't do this. It doesn't flip around into a tablet easily. It doesn't have the tent mode that lets you use the display like this, where I found using it like this with a game controller is really fun. I've enjoyed that a lot. So this is definitely easier to carry, even though that ZenBook Pro 14 OLED is a great device. If you're never going to use the pen and never going to use the tablet mode, that is definitely the device to get, I would say. But this thing is just so tiny, so svelte. Really, it's a great device. So I really like it. Hope you enjoyed this look. I'll be doing more videos on the X13 2023. We'll look at pen performance and other tweaks and things that I come up for it as that happens. But these are kind of my initial impressions and things that I'm seeing with the device. Hopefully you enjoy these long, rambling reviews on these things. And if you do, go ahead and like and subscribe to the video. And we'll catch you on the next one.